What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 326.
Wowzer.
So 3 times 2 is 6, 326. That's what it was. Thanks for joining us. As always, my name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts. And then also, as always, I'm joined by...
I'm Ron. Oh,
and John.
I did the I'm thing.
You did.
I
just said and John. I just went with and John. So
it works, guys. It works. Yeah. People know. Well, Merry Christmas Eve.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
craziness.
When this guy comes out, it'll be Christmas Eve, and
what a time to be alive.
Yeah, right. What a time to be alive.
What a time, man.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So typical fashion, we've got a bunch of new stuff to talk about. A couple, kind of close a couple loops on a show that we've been watching for its first season run, and kind of catch up on last week's huge release of Spiderman No Way Home. We'll kind of save that towards the end of the show because we probably will talk a little spoilery at the end of that, so you can tune out if you don't want to hear the spoilers. But also this week we're going to be talking about Matrix Resurrections, which is in theaters and on HBO Max if you'd prefer to watch it that way. And also John mentioned it a little bit last week, but I know we've all at least gotten through the first 3 episodes of HBO's new show Station 11, which is also airing now. And, after releasing, I think the first 2 or 3 episodes, it's coming out with like 2 episodes every week or some sort of release pattern like that. So again, a lot to go through, but to start the show, we're going to kind of catch up a little bit on the finale of season 1 of Hawkeye.
Uh-oh.
I got a visitor. You guys take control of this. Go ahead.
You've got a sidekick.
Cool. So, man, we're at the season finale of Disney Plus's Hawkeye.
Mm-hmm.
A crazy set of events have occurred. Last week in episode 5, we were first introduced to the concept that Kate Bishop's damn mother is working with none other than Kingpin, who we've only seen in the Netflix Daredevil series, and now he's graduated to the Disney Plus world. So that's where we kind of are at, at episode 5 and episode 6, the series finale, the season finale. Why did I say series finale? Feels like it.
Well, you never know with the Disney shows. I would say this show feels the most like it left a lot of things up in the air that like you could roll easily into not just another season, but just another episode.
Absolutely.
You could have, you know what I mean? So, and I think that's partially because they kept it small, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the scale of this show as opposed to the other Disney shows. But I think you were leading up to maybe the big question, Ronald, that I guess we can put to Steve now that he's back, because this is something he can catch right up with. But how do we feel about just the way that Kingpin was handled this week? He had a bit more to do. Last week we saw him. It looked like classic Kingpin. I still think there's some question as to whether the continuity is exactly picking up from the character we saw on the other show, but it seems pretty much like they're just saying, yeah, that Kingpin on the Netflix Daredevil show is the MCU Kingpin. Or do you think he seemed different, or what? How do you feel about the way that Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, a.k.a. the Kingpin, came off?
I mean, I do think the intention is probably to make it seem like it is the same from the Marvel Netflix shows. I think if anything, it's if people, I don't know, if the ambiguity that is there is really just to probably have conversations like on the internet to kind of keep the show going, because it only had 6 episodes. But I think I don't know why they would do that.
You're saying we're nerding right into their hands, Steve?
I think so. I think last week we were talking. I think I may have even been the one that mentioned it. But it was like, it is an interesting take just because of the context of everything that they've talked about with the Netflix shows before. But I mean, especially after seeing, No Way Home and, seeing even another element with, Matt Murdock being involved in that. It's just like another thing that you just would say, okay, well, I mean, they laid so much groundwork in that Netflix show, and it's such a beloved show by a lot of Marvel fans. To have it be in some way connected to the MCU seems like something that they've just committed to at this point. But in general, I kind of feel like I really did like the show, the season overall, and I did like the finale overall. But I feel like that part or that villain, it seemed like a lot of it was like really rushed in this last episode. I think the build up to showing Kingpin briefly in the penultimate episode, and seeing so much of him in this episode, to me kind of seemed too fast, and especially where you see him end in the episode, and what is or isn't going to come of his character going forward. That seemed a little haphazard to me. Like that didn't feel very well paced or handled, to be honest. But
I want to hear what you have to say about this, Ronald, but I just want to add, Steve, remember when we were worried, when I was the one who was worried about them introducing Kang or some variant of Kang in the last episode of Loki's first season? I was saying that felt like a lot to deal with in one episode, and that was why I didn't really know or want them to to introduce Kang like that. So I think that this is like an example of what I was afraid of, that you would end up sort of introducing a character, throwing them into the mix, but not really giving them enough of a central part in the story, so much so that you really could have believed there was going to be another episode after this one that kind of cleaned up some of those storylines. But I also think that what happens with Kingpin at the end of his story in this season, like when something happens off screen, we all know that means we didn't see it happen. So I don't think we know what happened to him at all, but they definitely wanted us to see a sort of down and out version of him at the end of this story, that he fought pretty well for a guy his size and age, but they wanted us to end with a notion that he can be beaten. So maybe he's going to be sort of a mid-tier bad guy, not like a master. What do you think, Ronald?
I think one of the things that we all are big fans of is storytelling. And sometimes, within a short amount of time, you can really pack in a lot of story in a way that feels fair to each character. And this didn't feel fair to me. This is what I was afraid of for this series, is that, in the process of trying to develop a character, that people get left behind. It really felt like there was no true villain. It really felt like it was no true danger. It really didn't feel like...
For the listeners, I'm nodding.
Yeah, yes, like the stakes... It really didn't feel like the stakes were high enough until the last episode, which really feels like it was being shoehorned in. And this is my only argument. For 6 episodes, you could have spread that out in a way that felt fair and fleshed out. And it felt like the relationship between the two characters was a priority over establishing superheroes and villains and explosions and fighting the way that we want. And sometimes I feel like, I think we're going to get to a point, if they keep doing shows like this, where people are like, there used to be there was this real offensive thing that this lady said, shut up and dribble, shut up and fight, shut up and do something that feels superhero-y, and don't get all sappy and weird on me. Just kick each other's asses. Yeah, that's my complaint.
See, I liked that part of the show. I liked the characters talking and the slow down pace, and the fact that it felt like more of a character piece. And that's kind of what I was enjoying that up through even last week, when, like I said, there was like a fight in a parking lot that felt climactic, because this show has kept it small. And I think when you said it didn't have a villain, I felt like the storyline was in search of stakes in this last hour of the season, because it really doesn't feel like the villains were up to anything that was that pressing. It wasn't that they hadn't been bad. It was that bad things had happened in the past. Ambiguous what they're doing right now. Maybe I missed it. There didn't feel like there was much of a ticking clock on what the bad guys were, quote unquote, doing. So I do think that kind of made this feel a little bit like I didn't feel rushed to me. It just felt incomplete in a storytelling sense. But I think I started to sort of get into that vibe of just, it's kind of neat that it has resisted having, a moment where a portal opens in the sky and a giant colored beam of light shoots down or whatever. We didn't see that. But it is weird that replace the sort of like the whole universe is in trouble storyline, there was sort of nothing but like hints and allegations. And I don't know, I kind of like that approach. It's just, it was an odd fit. It did feel sort of like, in the end, it was very low key, and I did not find myself being disappointed when the credits started. I did just sort of feel like, oh, well, Cool. I guess they're going to do more with that, or now they have all these new characters in the mix. I mean, I could see a lot of benefits that came out of this show, and there seems to be a big reveal maybe about Hawkeye's wife, too. That's like, okay, so there's a storyline that definitely they can jump into with a second season, but it doesn't feel that urgent. It doesn't feel like they've got to find the thing to stop the thing. It feels like, oh yeah, all these characters are just sort of in play, and even Jack, even Tony Dalton's character, just feels kind of introduced now. It doesn't feel like we really saw them close the loop on his story. I will say at the end of the season, the element that maybe worked the least for me was the LARPers. I felt like it was sort of, it kept feeling shoehorned in and kind of awkward, and like the show was winking at you saying, this is our wacky element, don't you love this? I didn't really need that element. But aside from that, I thought this was a pretty well modulated show, and I'll say it again, just extremely low key, which I did not necessarily expect, and I did enjoy. So I think that if they hadn't sort of scrambled for those stakes, maybe it would have felt more confident and just kind of fun and kind of Shane Blacky, sort of like, just, it's more about, like you said, Ronald, like it or not, it's more about watching these characters hang out than it is about watching them save the world.
Yeah, it
really
is.
And I feel like it's almost like, part of me, as much as I like seeing Kingpin and Vincent D'Onofrio's, take on that character again, it almost felt to me like, knowing that it's only a 6-episode season, that like, there was enough there with the people that we'd already seen in the show to really kind of get to a satisfying finale, like, and maybe introduce Kingpin at the very, very end or something, as like a teaser or stinger, or like a cliffhanger type thing. But like, I think in invoking him, or his reputation or his presence in multiple episodes kind of made it feel like they had to do something like this. But the stuff with Maya and like even Yelena kind of coming for Hawkeye, like I feel like there was enough with this idea of the past catching up with you for so many of the characters that I don't know that like the Kingpin of it all really added anything besides just the presence of a true Marvel villain that people are familiar with,
kind of an Easter egg, and like something for the fans, and
and it's cool, it's fun. But I mean, like, when you have something as a home run as he was in the Netflix series as the character, I just think that to kind of like roll him out here, it doesn't have that impact that I did not have that impact watching it
didn't feel as momentous as well.
You're right. I think go ahead, I'm sorry, Steve.
I'm just the point I was trying to make is just that, like, I think that there was enough there that I found interesting with the fact that maybe his presence was looming, but like not really being a part of this story yet, much as he becomes a part of it in the last episode. Like it ramps up too quickly to him having a real presence. And I found Maya's conflict very interesting, and her kind of realizing what's happening, and maybe the involvement of him in her father's death, and not so much the Ronin character. And honestly, like the Yelena, Natasha, Hawkeye stuff, like that is some of the more interesting stuff from the whole season to me. And especially when she comes into the show, that's a presence where you're like, you feel that, and that feels great. And like, she really does make the best of every scene that she's in, specifically with Kate. And that seemed like that netted way more for the show, for the season, than I think, rolling out Kingpin and having him really be so present in this final episode. But I don't know. I want to see more of him, though. Obviously, I like him as Kingpin.
Part of me feels like a better version of this conflict would have revolved around the Maya character and Kate Bishop meeting Yelena in like the second episode, and then her pursuing Hawkeye pretty aggressively throughout. And then maybe the hint of Kingpin at the end of this season, like not even showing him fully. Maybe a scene just showing him talking.
That's kind of what I'm.
I would say either that or start the question of who, like, reveal Vera Farmiga is up to something earlier, and start the question of who she's. Like, maybe deal with Jack, and then at the end of the second episode, Jack seems to be locked away, and we're like, well, he's locked away. And then we go, wait a minute. she's behind it all, and then
Yeah.
see that she's kind of working for somebody, because then I think you still could have like a cool, I do think they wanted to have like Kingpin kicks ass as what would happen, and I think that is a suitable climax. But I think the fact that when you talk about ramping up to all that in one episode, that could have felt more earned. And I think it's just they want to have these reveals. They want to have something at the end of like the 4th or 5th episode that is like, oh, this is the thing everyone's going to be talking about. I don't know that they've quite worked out the structure of these shows just yet. Because ever since last time we talked about this, Ronald, you've got me thinking about like, you know, I mean, I already thought the Netflix shows were reasonably cinematic. But the fact that these are like almost cinematic, but in a different way, it does make you wonder, like, well, what's the advantage of this new? I mean, Kingpin is a great example. Okay, what's the advantage of having him in the MCU versus the way they depicted him on the other show? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I thought he was a little scarier on Daredevil. You know. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see when they bring Daredevil in if it feels like they've kind of mutated the energy of that character, because there is something a little bit less. Like, I don't think that on a Disney Plus show you're going to see someone's head gets crushed in a door, a car door by Kingpin. You know, like not that I crave that. Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the fact that he could go that far with something that simple and that brutal is part of why we're all excited to see him on this show. And if their version of that is just let's have him throwing people around, it's okay, that's fun, but it loses a little something, you know. So I don't know.
That's one part that gets lost in the Disney stuff is like, we're talking about comic books where people die. I mean, sure, they come back, but like, people die, people fall off of things, people get smashed with things, and Disney is kind of pussyfooting around this whole idea that somebody could get hurt. And the worst that they could do is like a shot happening and then a person falling from a back view. And I'm not saying I need to see blood splatter. I'm just saying violence is handled very tenderly in this Disney world. And that is strange for, you know, we've read these comic books where like people have died, you know, people have, you know, had things severed, you know, it's like that's kind of what's being missed in all of this stuff. Like, that's the Disney of it all. You know, the of it all. That's the Disney of it all, is that you really are getting your balls cut off when it comes to, like, what a comic book really was for people. Is like, there was violence. And violence is like on a lower tier of a thing in this world. And I'm not trying to say that violence is the only thing that people look to comic books for, but yeah, man, I want to see somebody get kicked in the fucking chest and fall off a building. It's just what I want to see. It happens all the time in comic books. It just, yeah. Anyway.
Well, yeah, and I think it's just a matter of certain things that you just know they aren't going to do, and it's like, okay, that was a slightly different feel, those shows. And so, you know, I'm not one to complain about the sort of homogenized style, because I think that's part of what makes these MCU things work together. But there are some times where you realize, they probably won't go back to that tone exactly. This slightly goofier version of Kingpin might be like the baddest ass that we get. But I still will say, ultimately, I ended this show still just fine with everything. And like, I don't think anybody really came off looking like, oh, this performance sank the show, or this storyline really didn't work, outside of that LARPer thing, which I just felt like it just felt wedged in. It just felt like we were supposed to be giggling at that the whole time, and I don't think it made me laugh once. But I like the idea of like, oh, they're so low rent that they have to kind of get regular schmoes to help them out. I like that.
Right. Yeah.
But it was just a little silly the way it was executed.
I did enjoy the show overall.
So if we're going to put something in this show's stocking, for this episode, since it's our Christmas Eve episode, we're stuffing the stockings of the projects that we're talking about. So what do we want to put in the stocking for Hawkeye? Do we want to put a gift card? Do we want to put Reese's, which is one tier down? A gift card is great. Reese's is pretty good. Chapstick is okay. And then Cole. That's a big drop. What would you give it?
I'll put some chapstick in it. It'll be some Sephora chapstick. It's high end. It's pretty good. You know, it's quality, but it's chapstick nonetheless. You're getting some chapstick, Hawkeye.
I'll go with the Reese's.
I'm going
give
Reese's
it some Reese's.
too.
Yeah. I might even go to the Reese's with the Reese's Pieces in it.
Oh yeah.
What?
Get just for being kind of like, a nice little holiday thing, a little crunch,
Yeah.
little something, something.
I'm
Okay.
gonna give them
It's just not there yet for me, all the way up there.
What I'm doing is I'm just like a grandma who's just really trying to win points. I'm getting like a king size Reese's
Ooh.
sticks, so you get 4 of the little Reese's sticks with the
Okay.
wafers and everything. So I'm gonna get one of those. But yeah, I think
Cool.
Some variety.
pretty good plus is about where I would put
Yeah.
Hawkeye overall. It had elements I loved, but overall it was just a pretty solid thing. And I haven't heard anything about whether it's coming back. But again, it feels like of all of them, the maybe the one that's the most primed just to be outside of Loki, which we know has like a continuing storyline. But I just mean,
Yeah.
could you have another season of this basic vibe? I think
Yeah.
Hawkeye could easily, be a fun second season.
Yeah.
So
It's not Hawkeye's fault that it's not trending this week. It's not, man. I feel so bad for it. It's not Hawkeye's fault. It's like if this fell any other time of the year, people would be like, "Oh my God, did you see Kingpin?" Now it's like,
yeah, we got lots of. Well, I mean, maybe after we talk about Spider-Man, we'll talk about this kind of year of Marvel that we just finished up. That was a lot of Marvel.
Hell yeah.
So, well, let's talk about another show that we now have all seen the first few episodes of. This is HBO, or is it Cinemax? Which
HBO.
shingle? It's an HBO series, Station 11. And it's based on a book that was very highly regarded. It's been in development for a little while. It's sort of just a look at the future of mankind after a pandemic event wipes out a lot of people. And so if it sounds like The Leftovers, it's not really like The Leftovers, but it has in common with that show the sort of tone maybe of finding people who are in a morally ambiguous situation. It reminds me of Lost, too, in that sense of just you're getting people's stories and finding out what sort of choices they've made, and it's slowly spooling out those stories of the characters, but we are still getting deeper and deeper as of the third episode. We're still getting deeper and deeper glimpses of some of the timelines that we've been given a peek of, so it's like the implications of picking those timelines to follow. I think we're still seeing it pay off more and more as we go. It's impossible to know what the real scope of this thing is. What does everybody think? Station 11.
I mean, we were talking a little bit before we started recording today. Like, this is the kind of show where I feel like some people just are going to have a hard time watching it, only because of like the raw nerve of what we're still going through right now as people, as humans, as a nation, as a world. Like, it's just a little bit scary to watch. And I mean, I mentioned it last episode. It was so weird. Like, right before the pandemic hit, like I was actually in Chicago and I saw a portion of them filming this show. Inadvertently, I saw them filming like a part of the sequence, like when they find the brother's hotel or his apartment complex, like in the snow, like that.
Oh, in the snow, yeah.
Yeah, like I think it's when they're coming out of it.
Oh wow!
After they've been there for 8 months, but it's so surreal to like to have seen that and know the show is about a pandemic, and then have a pandemic of our own and still be in it when the show comes out, and then to watch that pilot episode. It was really hard to watch. Like I can totally see some people having trouble getting through a show like this. It is it's a very popular novel and it's got a huge fan base, and I can see the appeal. And obviously I'm in to see this show all the way through, and I can't wait to see more of it. But just to speak directly to that first episode, like when you really kind of see the start of it, it's like a little mini version of Contagion, and it sets up this this idea of a bit of a time jumping narrative, where we're basically, from what we've seen so far in the first 3 episodes, some version of like a 4-ish plus different timeline in terms of different years that we're kind of jumping around in between of the story, starting with episode 1, which is like present day in 2020. And it's just, I mean, as the first 3, like I'm so in on the show. Like, I think it's incredibly made. The cast is amazing. I can't wait to see more of the cast and more of where their characters are going. I do hope I get to see more of Himesh Patel. I really, really like him. And, he's very present in that first episode again, as what is his name? Is it Javine?
I think
I think it's Javon.
I think it's Javon. I don't know, whatever it is. His character, like in that first episode, like the how quickly it escalates.
It's like Javon. It's like
Yeah.
spelled J. I knew
Yeah.
it had a double E in it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's Jeevan, so it's Javon.
Okay, cool. But like just how quickly that escalates for that character and the realizations that he comes through like over the course of an evening or so, and that is, it's just very scary. And like the whole sequence at the supermarket and that employee asking if he should be worried or if he should go home, or that was hard to watch. Like that made me very emotional.
Well, that whole let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of those characters now that you guys have seen it, because that whole scene where Javon is with Kirsten trying to decide like how to take her with him, because he doesn't want to kidnap a little girl. He doesn't want to do anything creepy, but he sort of does not want her to walk off by herself. That whole conversation where he's trying to negotiate, like, okay, you have to want to come with me. You have to say you want to come with me. I'll let you do whatever you want, but I think it might be better. And then he ends up lying to her, to get her to come with him. But like it's like a benevolent lie. But you feel the touchiness of that situation, because even what he's doing, buying all the groceries, like if this turns out not to be a doomsday scenario, you're in you're in trouble. You know what I mean? You've done something strange. So it is a little bit like trying to figure out, like, are we in doomsday rules yet? Because if we're in doomsday rules, then obviously I've got to take care of this 8-year-old. But if we're not in doomsday rules, this is someone else's kid. Yeah. And I'm a brown man in America standing here with someone's white kid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just felt like I felt all of that. And I felt like that the character dealing with that is a great microcosm for the kind of stuff that's going on in this show. The sort of scenes that they give you between characters that I think take away the sting of the bleakness and the grimness that we're talking about, because it finds room for like interesting character dynamics that are always fun in this type of story. I hate to use the word fun, but it's true. They are fun to watch. Some characters bounce off of each other. And I'm surprised that I find this show watchable, because when I read the byline, I was like, oh, that book always sounded interesting. But now that we're in post-pandemic life, I'm like, or mid-pandemic life, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm in the mood for a dystopian scenario, or especially like, I don't mind picking up with the dystopia. I don't want to read in detail or watch society fall apart. I feel like I've witnessed some of that already. I don't want to relive it.
Right.
There were things about it that just felt very close to home, like that when that guy was in the supermarket reminded me of, I'm keep this as vague as I can. When I was working in DC, like 3 months before things happened, most of the people that I worked with asked to work from home. And I had no idea why. They didn't say why, but it was happening. And it kept happening. And it went from like asking to demanding. Nobody said anything. Nothing was on the news that could indicate it, but they were privy to information that we didn't have. It was crazy. Yeah. And then when it happened, trash stopped getting picked up in my neighborhood. All the businesses around me closed. The supermarkets were not open in some of the areas. So it was like, it felt like I was in the middle of this show. It was triggering, man. Like I got kind of emotional, because I remember the feeling of being, we lived downtown. That was like our move before we moved to the county and tried to, we were like, let's spend our last stay in the city. And then a lockdown happened and we didn't have access to hardly anything. And businesses were doing this cool thing where like they were kind of off the grid and delivering things. There was like this rogue list of businesses that were doing things in the city. And you could call them and they would deliver things. You pay some of them with cash. They had alcohol businesses and stuff like that. It was weird, man. It didn't feel real. And this show really does give you some insight into how quickly that can escalate, especially if you weren't paying attention the first time when it happened this time. I was, unfortunately, because I dealt with a research company, I was acutely aware of everything that was happening as it was happening. I was trying to warn my friends very quickly, but it felt like that. It felt very, oh my God, it's getting really bad. I'm telling you, it's getting really bad. And my friends would be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And you're like, I can't walk right now. I'm sick. It got weird. It got really weird. So This triggered the
Yeah.
shit out of me. I'm gonna be honest. I kind of bawled. The third episode, I just started crying. To be completely honest with you.
The second episode, the text, little girl,
Oh, the
little girl got the text.
text.
That was
That
like
was
an unexpected. Like,
rough.
oh, I didn't even think about.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
it's not just knowing these things have happened to these characters. It's
Yeah.
witnessing these characters cope with them when they're happening. That can be so like torturous when you're dealing with this kind of scenario, because you know you might have to live through that kind of thing sometime. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I don't know. Anytime it's about someone wasting away from a disease or people losing people or whatever, it just
Yeah.
makes me brace myself, because it's like, yep, I know they're going to have that part where we see the character go through the worst thing a person can go
Yeah.
through. Otherwise, they're not doing their job as storytellers.
Yeah.
But again, they're still finding, I just at the risk of making it sound grim, they still find these moments for these little glimmers of humanity and people being kind
Yeah.
to each other. Or I don't know, it feels like it's not trying to be bleak and grim, but it's almost impossible to figure, like, what show did they think they were making before this all happened? Now it feels like it's a torn from the headlines kind of scenario.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what show? You know what I mean? What would this show have been without the recent events? You know?
Yeah.
Would it just be too bleak, or would it seem? I don't know. I wonder how I would feel about it. I think maybe even though I'm less interested in this kind of subject matter because life has gotten strange, I also think I'm a little bit more accepting of it because life
Yeah,
has
yeah,
gotten
yeah.
strange. So
Yeah.
It is a really good show. Like, you know, that's one thing that I failed to say as I was talking about the triggering of it. It is a beautifully told story. And this connectedness with this book that exists. I'm really interested to see.
oh yeah, like the graphic novel.
Yeah, the graphic novel
Within the
entitled
story, right.
yeah, Station 11 that is kind of woven throughout this, and there's a really cool commentary about a couple of things that I'm watching. Matrix too. I can't wait to talk about that. But like the idea of how art informs the things that you create. Life informs the art that you create, and how, you know, one thing you do may be a series of 50 things you've experienced in little pieces from it, and then you kind of don't know until you're like really looking at the whole thing and like, oh man, I did this because, you know, in third grade I liked, you know, I read a Spiderman comic, and in fourth grade I did this, and when I was 25 I did this. Like, there's a real cool underlying story about art and its creation
Yes.
that is going throughout it. That is honestly, that's
Excuse me.
equally as emotional as even the pandemic stuff, because that has a strong effect on how the story's told. And the lead, the woman who has written Station 11, I don't know her name, but she is out of this world good. And I can't stop like thinking about the weight of that. Miranda Carroll, who's played by Danielle Deadweiler, just out of this world good. And for the performances alone, I'd say check this out. You will not regret it. You'll be sad, but once it picks up, there is a lot of hope in it. There is a lot of hope in the storytelling.
Well, like you said, it's about artists, and it's about like there's like theater, and I mean there's different stuff
man.
that's like what society, when it's rebuilding or when it's like holding on to its soul, kind of like, you know. And I think that idea of theater and art being part of civilization, but like, when do we need them, and like when would we say we need those things again after a period of you know, rebuilding. So I've always found that interesting. So
I think it's also like a really interesting, like, thinking about when it picks up. Like, I don't know that we're even at a point where the show truly's picked up. You know, like, I feel like
right.
the show seems like it's such a, you made the Lost comparison, and you know, it definitely feels like that to me. And even the Leftovers still too, like, where there was the idea of a mystery box, and like you have this graphic novel in this movie or in this series that seems to be such, and again, I haven't read the books. I don't know anything about the story. I don't know where it goes, but you know, you have these elements already in place over the first 3 episodes that are very ambiguous, and you know, that you are starting to get some sort of understanding of. But there's, you know, for every one that gets introduced and you kind of like, oh, I get it. Like, you know, she met him here, and they were together here, and like, but there's all this like there's lines of dialogue that are from this graphic novel, and it's like, well, how did that person get that graphic novel? Or there's only one of them, or like there's all these little things, like for every like one thing you find out, like two more pop up that you're like, what's that? Like, so I really like that. Like I like that the scope of it seems very organic with whatever the story is going to ultimately be about, and that so much of it is going to be about this the after the actual pandemic stuff. Like it seems like the pandemic is an inciting incident, but it seems like the story is really the post of it all. And the idea of what this graphic novel is, and even some of the imagery in the show so far, kind of like how the pilot episode ends. The pilot episode ends like with this like bird's eye view of what civilization looks like from space, with this man in an astronaut suit that you then see on the cover of this graphic novel, and that you then see in an episode closer in the third episode. There's just this iconography that is kind of permeating the first three episodes, and
just ripping off Last Man on Earth, basically. Astronaut.
So some
is
of it
Jason
just
Sudeikis
like,
up there?
Some of it just seems like, it doesn't seem supernatural. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it's kind of like there's something higher at play, something else is going on. And I like that bending nature of, like, there's a scene with the Miranda character, the writer of the graphic novel, like where she's interviewing for a job, and like they're talking, the interviewer, the employer is talking about like the shortest distance between these pens that he has on his table.
I love
and
that
just
scene.
The way he explains that to her, that's obviously something that informs and influences her graphic novel like immensely. And just that idea of time and space and things like that, and the way this story seems to be given to us with time jumping around so much, and somehow the story flows through us watching it at these weird time intervals. It's really interesting, and I think the show is going to end up being pretty amazing if it kind of continues on the path that it's on. So like we've all said, the cast is really love Mackenzie Davis, so I can't wait to see her just probably tear the show up. Like, she's so good.
Well, it's also
so
it's also fun to watch an actor we've seen like her, who's in these indie things and does these intense things that are called up, she's asked to do. It's fun to watch an actor like that spread out and kind of play a well-rounded character that we spend time with like this. I mean, already she feels like there's a side to her that I haven't seen her play, but she's always great. So, and I think it's across the board, though. Any faces you recognize, it's a pretty interesting cast. They're not necessarily people that you've gotten tired of. They're people that you recognize. It's actors that you've seen before, but it feels like, okay, this is a chance for some of these actors to kind of step up. And we always talk about the HBO, like the budgetary aspect, the fact that their world building is very strong. When they put a show on, it's already been developed pretty well. So and I think how this show's going to be different from other shows that it might get lumped in with, like you mentioned, the kind of not quite supernatural, but just a general sense of there being some kind of design to the way that, even just the way that we see the different stories at the different times and how they're going to interconnect. So I'm extremely intrigued, and I especially agree that we probably haven't seen what it is yet.
Yeah, I agree. One more thing I wanted to say: Matilda Lawler, the little kid that plays young Kirsten, is carrying this role in a way that I just have never seen a kid have to do. She's processing things in front of people and acting her ass off in front of people, and it just feels very like, I don't know where this kid learned how to act, but like, because sometimes kid actors can be like
too much.
Too much. She's doing subtlety in a way, like little subtle things, and just a nuance to her performance that is just out of this world. Like, if this kid doesn't win anything, I don't think that they've watched the show. Like, well,
she's playing a successful child actress too.
Yeah.
So like, I think that you have to kind of believe that her character has learned how to behave and act around adults, especially because when you're a child actor on the stage, you're around adults a lot, and you're expected to like have this kind of composure. So I think the fact that she's thrown into all these situations, and we see, like you said, kind of an amazing. She seems like she's got this composure. I think a lot of that may come from the fact that the character is intended to be like sort of what's the word, preternaturally or like prematurely mature
Yeah.
kid already. So I think that, yeah, it's an interesting character, an interesting approach. That she's almost like stoic, the way
Yeah.
that she just lets things happen and watches things.
So good.
All right, well, let's decide what to put in the stocking of this
Stockings.
project.
I'll
tell you,
give a gift card.
You give a gift card?
I'll give a gift card. I'm in for this
Where's
one.
the gift card to?
Whatever the name of the grocery store, because that $10,000 bill, I'm sure the
Yeah.
show could use a gift card to help
Oh
pay.
man.
So maybe
Javon,
a $10,000 gift card. We all team up and give
Well, I'll
it a
pitch in.
$10,000.
Yeah, we can pitch in if you guys are down. We can.
I was thinking that or GameStop. So I don't, whichever.
So I'll give it a gift card to a Super Walmart.
There you go.
Wally World.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think we all pretty much thought it was a good show, man. Like
I mean, I think it's actually like half a Reese's and half a gift card, because I think this is like, so far I'm hooked. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
But like Steve, I believe this can be something really special and really amazing as it rolls along, because it's that kind of show. It's a little bit plot driven, but it's more than that. It's got like it's leading you towards something,
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what that is. We'll come back and talk once we've seen a few more. So
Cool. Why don't you guys talk about the Matrix?
Okay.
What do you think? You guys down with that?
yeah, or some version of me is.
Yeah. Since this is a simulation and
Yeah.
we're
Trapped in a
not
loop.
real. Yeah, we're
We're
trapped
just
in a
going through
loop.
the motions, saying words that we don't even know what they mean. I don't know what I'm saying, Ronald. Do you know what you're saying?
No, not at all. I feel
What's
like
the
this.
Matrix? What's the next topic?
So this is the fourth movie, right?
Right. This is Matrix Resurrections,
Yes.
which
The
is
fourth
sort
entry.
of. I feel like I knew this before the movie comes out and says it,
Mm-hmm.
but the movie comes out and says this. This is like in the early part of the movie that someone mentions, like, it's a meta aspect of talking about making more Matrix or making a sequel to the Matrix, and within the movie that makes sense. And someone basically says, if you don't come back and do it, then someone else is going to do it. And I feel like I knew somehow, maybe I'd even read, I don't know if Lana Wachowski in an interview has said that she came back to do this partially because she knew that Warner Brothers was going to try to turn the Matrix into one of these never dying franchises, and that it was like, okay, do you want to be part of it, or do you want us just to do it without you? And so I got that impression that, and Lily Wachowski sat this one out. I think has retired from the film industry as far as you know, but that Lana had an idea, but I don't think it was like, oh, I was sitting around and I had a great idea for a Matrix movie that has to happen. It was more like, oh, they're going to make one anyway. I'm going to get in there. Here's my idea / commentary on even making another Matrix movie. And I feel like this movie is doing both of those things. It's attempting to be, as you said, the fourth one in a big franchise, but it's also basically saying, what do you really want from one of these sequels to a sequel to a sequel? And like, do you really want the creators that you love to be trapped making the same thing over and over again, rather than a success like Matrix, meaning you can make whatever you want, not that you can make more Matrix movies, So
Right.
I think the movie's trying to do both things. Did you feel that, Ronald, that it was like a tug of war between like a story and like a parable where everything's a symbol for something, and then there's the other part where these are characters that you're supposed to care about? And I didn't find that. I found that balance to be off in some spots. It was sometimes hard for me to view these concepts as characters.
This was like the cabin in the woods or the Scream of this. It really was like, there's literally a scene where these men are in a staff is in a pitch room talking about the Matrix, the game in the
game
movie.
within the story. Like in the story, it's a game that was made by Thomas Anderson, and it had its 3 versions, or I don't know if they say that, but it's very meta. It's extremely meta that they're like, you're going to make a part 4.
So there's a bunch of stuff happening at the same time. So on top of that, in real life, I mean, like IRL, like me, have played. There's a Matrix game that has just come out. The Unreal Engine, which is a new video game engine that's also used for special effects in movies, has a Matrix game, like a demo, where you're basically in this environment and you're not supposed to be able to discern real life from this video game. It's getting to that point where things are almost at a point, lighting wise, physics wise, that we can't discern the two. So these guys are talking about what makes the Matrix game so special, and it really does touch on like fan theories to things you've said about things feeling like a simulation to,
Right.
Can we make another one that's just as smart? Were the old ones bad? It's just like all this stuff kind of, it's a Reddit post in the scene form that really is an indication of what you're taking on once you get past this scene, you know what it is. It is just a deep and shallow commentary on what this movie is. What this movie means for the culture too. What'd you think about that? What'd you think about just how it played out? And
Well, I think, I can kind of expound on the idea, but I do think that if there's anything that has always kind of kept me at arm's length about like getting emotionally involved in the Matrix movies, as opposed to thinking that they look really cool and that the action, sometimes the sequences are just amazing, it's just that idea that like once you've gone and said, well, no, like this is a code and this is a program and it's inside this and this is a redo of this, and actually everything that you're seeing has happened a million times before. It's like I find that emotional through line back in that. Like I think the Matrix trilogy that ended years ago, it ended with this notion of like a Christ-like sacrifice on the part of Neo and Trinity, which of course, based on their names, it's like, okay, it's again, there's so much about the Matrix movies that is so on the nose and like painfully on the nose, but there's also no question that the Wachowskis were very smart about the way they put this together, and especially like their appreciation for a lot of the things that they kind of synthesized into the Matrix, like
Right.
different forms of different cultures storytelling and different kinds of mythology and technological ideas mixed with mythological ideas. And I think all that stuff is really interesting, and I think it's always been exciting to see happen, and I think this movie on a big screen would have had probably a little bit more of an impact on me. I don't think it's quite visually up to snuff as far as this franchise. It felt a little bit, I mean, I still always wonder if the settings on my television are just making everything look too crisp now and almost too video like. But this movie, like, I don't think it was as pretty as the other Matrix movies.
But
I think the Wachowskis have done lots of stuff, though. They're not quite Peter Jackson, but they're interested in like super high res and different kinds of imagery. So I don't know. I think that there were some cool touches, but overall I felt like where this movie kind of needed to really wow me, and it didn't quite, was in that like finding a new bullet time. They even make a reference to it in the movie. We got to find a new bullet time, and it's like, I appreciate that they do that, but I guess my point is you can't always, like, you can be really clever, and I do think they're very clever. All that meta stuff we're talking about was it felt so self-aware that you have to give them credit for coming out with that idea. This is not, the movie we're about to talk about, Spider-Man No Way Home, is a movie that like cashes in on nostalgia in a way that I think really pays off, but it like leans into this idea of like the value of these myths. This is like
Right.
a fourth movie in a series that dares to sort of question what it is you value about this series. But in the end, it felt to me like, I don't know, like, without spoiling the story, there's not much else I can say about like where it actually goes, but it is kind of a love story, and they do it does feel a little bit like one of those sequels that's like, oh, we're attempting to kind of scale it back and strip this idea down to something a little bit simpler. And again, I thought scene to scene there were things that worked and things that didn't. Overall, I came out of it feeling a little like, when it was over, I was like, well, I watched that. But that's not to say that there aren't some pretty interesting moments. And again, there are some really cool looking bits of action, the way it's choreographed, just the lighting. I don't know how you felt about the visuals. I know you are very in tune to the visuals and the sound mix, Ronald. I definitely want to hear your assessment of that. But to me, it felt like it was not the Wachowskis' best, and it was not the best Matrix sequel. And it did maybe begin to make you question, as all sequels to sequels can, like, what is it about this that we're really coming back to? What is it that we really value about the ideas behind the Matrix at this point? And I'll actually be interested to see if this is a thing that kicks off a new phase for this, or if it kind of sits idle for a little while because of this one.
Sometimes I wonder if so much time has passed that the creators themselves have kind of forgotten what made this thing special. This is so weird. I never thought I'd ever say this. You know who I think should do this? Who should? God, I'm gonna just throw a name. We love this dude. Denis has a love for this sort of thing, and I think that he could have pulled off a better Matrix than the Wachowski at this point. Like this feels like so much of so self-aware and so parroting in itself and paying homage to itself, literally showing footage beside things happening at sometimes, that it almost feels like, oh man, I'm gonna say this feels like Lana did this one, right?
Yeah.
This feels like Lana's Only God Forgives.
You say that about everything now.
No, man.
I think he says that to lower my expectation.
He
so
does.
I can just go in and maybe enjoy the movie.
No,
it's inevitable now that you're going to be like, hey, it's not so bad, It's not.
But you know what I'm saying. But you know what I'm saying, man. Like there's what you're saying. Like if it were the thing for like Sony has a contractual obligation in order to keep the franchise, they have to make another movie, right? What if Lana was presented with the same thing? Like, Lana, look, we're going to make this movie with or without you. And she was like, okay, cool. And she shit on it. She shit on it. It's like,
Do you think this is like a so are you saying that like she like
it's doing both.
It's
like it's paying
because she can, or
it's paying some fan service, but like it pays so much fan service and it's trying to serve the purpose of being a sequel that it may be missing what made the first and second. I don't want to exclude the third. What made the first two special is not. I'm not saying imitate the entire movie. I'm not saying that. You don't have to have the same style. It could be nuts, but.
Well, it's interesting how much it tries to go against that, Ronald. How much it like tries to it does both things. It actually spends 30 minutes trying to make you think it's not interested at all in sequelizing the other movies,
Yeah.
But then it also has a moment where Neo fights some people and then says after that, I still know Kung Fu.
Yeah. Okay, that's another thing.
So I'm saying it's like it's doing both those things. It's doing like a subversive, like not the sequel, not your granddad's sequel, and it's turning around and having lines that are like, granddad version callbacks to lines from the first movie. So I don't know. I think that's it in a nutshell. And it's not to say that it won't be entertaining or enjoyable to some people in between those, because I do think some of the moments of mythology that they try to scrape like out of this, and also just that I don't blame them for feeling like there's a universe to play around with here. I don't blame them for thinking this idea has some juice in it for story. I think that what this movie is continually saying is, why do you want to keep seeing the same story? Why do you want, so it is a little bit shitting on it, Steve, on purpose. Like, it is a little bit of a, what's the saying? Like the fox is in the hen house or something, with this idea that like Lana Wachowski was interested in sort of giving the middle finger to the idea of a nostalgic Matrix movie. But somewhere in there, she made a movie that does worship especially
quite
the
literally.
First movie with all the reference. Yes. No, a good point, Ronald. It's very literal. But
It's
like
very
the cuts
literal.
and that it's meant to make it's like we come into this all assuming that we know the first movie is like the most important thing ever. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how it progresses. But you can't be the Wachowskis or a Wachowski and not have some shots that are cool or some effects that are like well choreographed. It's just, here's a good example too for me. There's a moment where there's a character like fighting in a hallway and they're like running around on the walls, which you kind of expect in a Matrix movie. And remember how exciting that was the first time you saw it, and how much of a purpose it served to have the character like dodging fire, bullet fire by running around on the walls. In this, it kind of feels like the old Mr. T cartoon when he would say, "Come on, kids, let's go." His team they were a bunch of gymnasts, and then the stock animation they had of them like lurching into action was always them like somersaulting and cartwheeling across the room, and it was always pointless just because they're gymnasts. That's not how they get around, you know.
Yeah.
But it feels like in the Matrix world, that's just how. Hey guys, come on! Somebody's just going to run along the wall and the ceiling just because they can. That's kind of what it started to feel like.
Yeah.
But there were still some cool fights. I thought the fight between Groff and Jonathan Groff and Keanu Reeves, I thought there were some good moments there. But someone said it looks like Keanu's saving himself for John Wick 4, and I did see a little like there is a little bit of clumsiness in some of the action choreography that I was a little surprised to see. Like maybe they could have edited it a little tighter or something.
It didn't feel the same. Like there's a pace to the fighting in the original trilogy that you just aren't seeing in this one. It feels like, but I thought that it was just Keanu, and then I saw other people like, it's like, you know what? Yeah, it's just spare me with that.
So you guys didn't like this? I mean, tell me what you're putting in the stocking, and I'll answer my own question.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I'm giving it chapstick. I think I'm okay with. I thought it was okay.
Yeah. I'm giving it chapstick too. This is again Sephora chapstick. It's like it's lip balm. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
You really want it, but
I'm giving them the whole Burt's Bees like little zipper pack that's got like, you know, the chapstick, the balm,
yeah,
the variety. Yeah, there you go.
Have you ever seen the Books for Christmas video? I think I've talked to you about this before. Look up when you get a chance on YouTube Books for Christmas. It's this little kid that gets books for Christmas, and he is pissed. He calls the books poop. But he screams, books for Christmas? What the heck is this? This is poop. It's like the funniest video, but it really is how I felt about this. Like, this is books for Christmas. This is really what but something about it I really liked.
Well, no, I was going to say the sincerity of it and like the sort of, that's why I feel a little, yeah. That's why I'm saying I'm going to give him some nice chapstick.
You'll see what.
Yeah.
You'll see it. Only God forgives. This is you'll see. You think I'm playing, but you see those ratings and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like,
you know those movies, Steve, where you want to give them credit for trying something, and then you also want to say, but it didn't. You know, be honest, that it didn't quite work. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Also, the Wachowski penchant for like weird old age makeup is well in place.
Yes. When you look square in the middle of somebody's face and like, man, those aren't wrinkles. Those are literally just makeup cracks. It's like very, very jagged, where there would not be wrinkles. The direction of the wrinkles are weird. Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it was very exposition heavy too, and I think that's another reason why it feels like of a piece for their stuff, but also another reason why it feels like if you've got that many scenes where characters are just kind of explaining what's going on, that's like part of their style, but it's an odd feel sometimes.
It really is.
All right, Steve's back.
Hey man, sorry. My dog sounded like she was choking on something. So I was like,
oh, okay. That's we heard a sound and we couldn't decide. I was like, maybe that's a kid that's crying at bedtime because it was just a weird sound from elsewhere.
Yeah, no, my dog is like sleeping in a bed like 10 feet behind me.
Oh, that's what that was.
She's like snoring. I was like, okay, she's snoring, and then she started like dry heaving almost, like she was like choking. So I was like, all right, come on, let's go get some water or something real quick. But yeah, she's had some issues recently, so I got a little worried. But she seems okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's cool, man.
I mean, just real quick, like. I'm obviously very excited to see this Matrix movie. I mean, I love the original one specifically. It's one of probably my favorite. Like, I don't know where it ranks, but I love the Matrix. Sequels are fun, not anything special for me, especially the third one, like you said, Ronald. But what I've been reading about this one and what you guys have just basically confirmed, I'm a little concerned about it. But you know, I'm very intrigued and very interested to see from like what the attempt looks like, because if there's anything that, you know, whether it's both of them or one of them in this case, like it does, you know, they're definitely filmmakers who like swing for the fences, in a lot of ways. And, it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. You look at like their Speed Racer movie or even Cloud Atlas, like these are really some grand ideas. And this one seems like if not like successful, definitely like a unique or interesting take on what this sequel to this like legacy property could look like. And from what you described, it kind of sort of makes me even more interested in seeing it. But I don't know, we'll see. But let's wrap this up and get into Spider-Man. I know we've been excited to talk about this. We really haven't talked about it much amongst one another,
Right.
simply saw it over the last week. But so yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home. I guess with the exception of the Hawkeye finale, which came out the week after it, I mean, kind of is the cap on Marvel's grand year of 2021. Where they've got 4 movies that account for basically 4 out of the top 10 movies of the year, top 5 even, I think. The other one I think is the other Marvel property that Sony put out, Venom. But and then they've got your Disney Plus shows, which was what, 4 shows?
Well, 5 if you count What If. So
5, oh yeah, 5 including What If, right. So yeah, I mean, this is the one. This is the movie that all the box office gurus have been talking about. Like, this is the movie that could, should, would save the box office. At least in terms of some semblance of it. Still in this pandemic that we're going through.
Even Paul Thomas Anderson was in the news saying Spider-Man was going to save the movies.
Yeah.
Like
right.
People always try to get him to talk shit about like
Oh, no.
tentpole movies and stuff, and he always either says no, I like those movies. He actually, I think, said he liked Venom a lot.
He did.
But even beyond liking them, he seems to appreciate what they do for movies, and he knows that it takes all kinds, of movies, and he grew up watching all kinds. So why would he be churlish about it now? So I don't know. I think that yes, everybody was talking about this movie as kind of like, even when we were talking about which movies were going to get kicked back and change the release dates and all that stuff, it seemed like what are they going to do with Spider-Man is the real question there, because this is the real. I mean, if you had Black Widow, if you had Shang-Chi, if you had the Eternals, those are all sort of, new characters, either more niche, an attempt to start something a little different. There's a lot about those movies that you might have said was more of like a bold new idea or something different for Marvel. Whereas this is Batman for the Marvel universe.
For sure.
I mean, this is the most popular character, the most recognizable icon, well established in several movies already. So this really was sort of like destined to be kind of a victory lap in a way for the year and for the character. And I mean, I think we can definitely talk about a lot about this movie. I think there's so much about this movie that pays off. There's so much about what they were trying to do that they pulled off extremely well in this film that I think it does open that question of like, okay, what is it that makes these movies a little extra special sometimes? This is one of those that made me feel those kind of vibes, not just
Right.
oh, I just got a great installment in the Marvel saga. This one felt like a movie that everybody involved was trying to make into a big event, and then lo and behold, kind of like Endgame, they actually managed to stick the landing with these moments and these turns. And if you saw it with the crowd, then you definitely felt the crowd having that ride. It was great. What do you guys think?
You definitely like well, like we said at the top of the show, like at the end of this, I guess we'll go out of the show with a couple mild spoilers or just talk spoilers for the movie in general, but just, being more kind of vague about, any of those spoilers or not getting into any of them, and more general, it is one of those things where you feel a little spoiled in the sense that, I was talking to a couple other friends about this. And it was like, this and Endgame, and even if you go back as far as like The Force Awakens, like these movies that really, some are starting points, some are ending points, but just manage to like have that or to provide that cinematic experience in a theater. And if you were able to experience this movie, like John said, with a crowd, on opening weekend, or I mean, from what it looks like, even this coming weekend, this movie's going to hold over probably decently considering how much money it made. Which, by the way, just quick mentions, like, it's breaking records like crazy by the day. So, it's like the number 2 opening of all time, behind Endgame, the biggest Sony release ever. instantly the biggest movie of 2021 and the pandemic era that we're looking at. Like, so it's just in the matter of 3 or 4 days, it's become that. So that's amazing. Kudos. Like, that's just phenomenal for everybody involved. But I think just like this cinematic experience that seems, we talked about it a ton on this podcast, with the rise of streaming and the collapsing of theatrical windows. It's what kind of movies can really survive this, what kind of movies can still be made for movie theaters and will always be in movie theaters. And this one is like the pinnacle of the kind of movie that we're talking about. This is in this league of the movies like I just mentioned that are all timers, and ones that over the past like 5 or 6 years have provided such unique theatrical experiences that like they're things that we'll probably talk about for decades. The way I felt watching The Force Awakens in theaters on opening night, same Endgame, same with this. Like, it's just a memorable experience beyond even what you think of the quality of the movie. It's just that theatrical thing is, it's like what you're chasing, or at least speaking for myself, it's what I'm chasing when you like want to see these movies with the crowd, especially when you have a choice in certain scenarios to watch them in the comfort and safety and security of your own home at your convenience. But this is this is what you're chasing, I think. And yes, I too, I was so impressed with, how well so much of this movie lands. I don't think it's a perfect movie. And I don't know that really any of the Marvel movies truly are perfect, but a few of them come very close. And I think this probably fits in that conversation, in my opinion. I feel like I kind of came out of this movie finally feeling much higher and more positive about Tom Holland's take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And not that I didn't like him as the character in any of his standalone movies, or, where he was in the Avengers films or the Captain America film in Civil War. But it's just something, that they managed to do in this movie really kind of frames his character in the kind of light that I was looking for, and there's more facets to his character or his take on this character that you really get to kind of explore in this movie that I didn't find in really any of the other movies that he's in. Like, beyond liking him as a person and thinking he's very charismatic and really has a lot of the things that you want to see in Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I was lacking for those movies in Homecoming and Far From Home. Like, I liked them, and they were good to very good in some cases, but nothing more than that for me. I don't think either of them. Let me think. I don't think either of those Spider-Man movies would probably be in like my top 5 or 10 Marvel movies. Maybe not. But this one, different conversation. I just think that what they managed to do with we talked earlier about the Hawkeye, and in just Marvel in general, like the idea of stakes and repercussions and like the risks that come with these characters being who they are in the world that they're in. This is a movie we're talking about for context, but it's just like, you get to go see this in a theater if you feel comfortable doing so. And those emotions, those stakes, when they hit and when they really try to go for some of those things, I personally find that they just kind of hit like tenfold, when it's that shared experience. And it's immeasurable, it's unavoidable, and it's just it only increases the experience in watching the movie for me. But in general, I thought this movie was pretty incredible and quite an achievement for Marvel, for Sony, and for every single person involved in this movie. So what did you think, Ronald?
I'm first have to say that interdimensional Spider-Verse travel into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie, is the best version of that for me. Live action wise, this to me is the best told story that this paid off for me in a way that it felt when the first Avengers came out.
Right.
Now, if like, this doesn't do the travel between the universes quite as well as the animated version, but this does that payoff that we've wanted. It didn't take 10 years to do it. The payoff that we have at the end of this trilogy feels so earned. And I think that the what you're talking about with Tom Holland feels like more intentional than I thought when I saw this one. Like maybe the progress of this kid. I mean, because he is a kid, you know. The decisions
like
that
the
he
character
makes.
was in high school this whole trilogy.
Yeah,
This movie is set during his senior year, so
Yeah.
even though Tom Holland looks well into his mid-20s at this point,
Yeah.
this version of Peter Parker was always this is the kid version. You're right,
Yeah.
and so this was like the culmination of his coming of age, kind of.
Yeah. And so when we meet him in this movie, him dealing with the there's this saying like sometimes you do something weird and
Not me.
an adult will say to you, once you do this thing, you're not a kid anymore. You know what I mean? It's like once you hit somebody, once you get into a car accident, when you first learn how to drive a car, you aren't a kid anymore. You know, it's like it changes a little bit, right? And so when you see Tom Holland's progression and the decision that he makes, that is a kid decision that has very adult implications, play out. It reminded me of why I love movies so much, why I love well-told stories. And the interplay between his friends feels more like amazing, like the villains.
Spectacular, even.
Spectacular. Like, there are points in this movie where I'm like, I screamed when I mean, this doesn't give anything. When Willem Dafoe is a scene stealing son of a bitch.
Especially in this role.
I
It's like
screamed out,
everything
"You
is
son
so
of a
amped
bitch!" How could you? How could you be so good on screen? And I remember
You
the
can't help it,
feeling.
man.
Yeah,
You can't help it.
watching so we recently rewatched the first Spider-Man, and look, guys, if you haven't seen the first one in a while, go back and watch it. It's so damn good. And then it's like the gift that keeps on giving. There's so many hints. There's so many pieces of homage throughout this movie. This is good. This is a great movie. Not perfect, but perfect doesn't have to be perfect in order to be perfect. I know that sounds weird.
That's so deep, Ronald.
You know what I
because,
mean?
hey,
Like,
I heard someone recently say a perfect movie is not a movie that doesn't have flaws. It's a movie that you forgive its flaws because of how good it is. And I think
it's perfect in that way.
It's funny the way you said, Steve, about where this movie ranks, because I remember thinking like, and I don't normally have these thoughts, but I was sort of like, this has got instant like top 5 MCU potential for me. Like this is,
I agree.
And I may have liked the other Spider-Man movies a little bit more, or appreciated Tom Holland's performance a little bit more, but I too always felt like they were kind of fun, slight palate cleanser type movies in between these other big movies. And even if you look at the villains and the stakes in them, they were kept relatively small compared to some of the other stuff in the MCU. So I agree, this is like a real step up to the plate moment in terms of this version of this character. And it kind of does make you come out of this going, yeah, Spider-Man as the kind of flagship character for Marvel, it makes sense on this deep emotional level, because so much of this movie is about Peter Parker and his heroism and what that means to be a hero, and like I felt like a really kind of deep and poignant exploration of what it means to be the person who's trying to do the right thing, even if you're also the person who makes, like you said, Ronald, a kid decision and fucks things up. So, you know, it's very Peter Parker to make a decision that has ramifications that you then spend the rest of the story trying like crazy to put things right and to own up for and to correct something that you caused, and to have that sort of guilt of this is my fault somehow. It's that to me is part of the Peter Parker story, and the way this movie doubles and triples down on that idea of like Peter Parker-ness. What does it mean to respond to threats in this way? What does it mean to try to be a hero? It connected to some of my favorite stuff in the comics that has tried to do that. I don't know if you were thinking of the comic book Superior Spider-Man at all in this story, Ronald, but like this movie found a different way into that idea of showing villains sort of empathize, or at least recognize the empathy in Peter Parker. I found that stuff, you know, the fact that so much of this movie is about Peter Parker trying to figure out a way to to not kill anybody and to not even kill the bad guys. To me, that says so much about the character, and I loved that. I mean, I just thought that stuff was incredible.
Me too.
The sort of clunky plot mechanics, and the spells in this movie are a lot like the time travel in Endgame. The movie does have a sentence or two to explain it, and it's like that's all you need to be off and running with the story. But if you do start to pick it apart, there are some. I don't even think it's that sloppy or messy. It's just comic book storytelling.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you can come out of this movie still kind of scratching your head over some of those decisions that were made based on the spells and that kind of stuff. But the emotional through lines I thought were incredibly well worked out and paid off great. And this idea of like a bunch of old villains coming together. It's really fun to just to see those villains, just to see Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx like hanging around in an apartment, butting heads and finding out their different philosophies, why they're a bad guy, all that stuff. I felt, and Thomas Hayden Church too, although he's maybe the most low key of any of them. There's all these characters that are back in this that it's fun to see them interacting, and to see them treated as more than just a villain of the week. I mean, I feel like this movie answers that question of how does Marvel handle its villains? Why do they have a problem with villains? I think this movie kind of does a really good job of finding a new spin on villainy and what it means for one of these stories.
I think that one of the things you mentioned about the villains, like the idea of so again, spoilers at the end here, but like the idea of having this idea that you're going to have these villains be the characters that come through as this spell gets messed up, and the layering of which villains they are, and like from these other Sony movies, and the idea of including Sandman in the villain group so that he can be the one that explains to Doc Ock and Green Goblin, like, you guys died, this is the point that you left that universe. Like, that's a really cool storyline.
And really well worked out.
Really is smart to think it through like that, because the moment that he does that in the movie, because the real stakes of his character being in the movie, he's just another villain in most in most comparisons to the rest of the movie, except for
the least villainous of all of them too. Like, he's the most sympathetic and the most reasonable of any of them.
Exactly, and he's the one. He's the one of the villains that has he has the turn. In the storyline that he was in before he actually has to die. And that's an interesting thing to pull in to Tom Holland's story, because it's such a vital piece of information as the spark for him not wanting to just send these people back. Explaining that and finding that piece of information out is really kind of a jumping point for just how great and how just pure of a person Peter Parker is trying to be as Spider-Man. And and that scene I think is really incredible. When they Norman Osborn and Doc Ock have this moment of realization after hearing that of well, and then they all kind of have that revelation of well, I don't want to go back, and I don't know, just the way that sets in motion the story for the villains in this world beyond just wreaking havoc. It's just, I don't know.
Well, Steve,
it's such a creative thing to do.
I think what you're describing for me, it reminds me of how smart I felt the movie was being about laying those facts in. How once those characters really are having those conversations, I was like, wow, they built up to this. From who's the first one that shows up? How do they do it?
Right.
Where's Peter Parker in his story? What is Doctor Strange doing? What's going on? There's all this activity going on, pop, 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 and then suddenly you're dealing with this group of characters together, and it was amazingly emotionally involving for me to see them discover that they've kind of been given this almost like an afterlife through this weird spell, and to realize oh, I don't want to go back. And they all have their own different attitude about what they were doing. And Jamie Foxx has maybe got the most fun kind of, he kind of wants to be bad. He's got this power and he's like, oh, I just really want to, I want to just be so bad with it. But he's also not wanting anyone else to make a decision that's wait, are you trying to take away this thing? I don't know. There's something interesting about him that's different from everyone else, no, I don't know. I just think I just agree. I was getting like I was enjoying that build up so much that because it's like so often in these kind of movies you have a question and you're like, wait, did they not explain that, or was I not supposed to have that question? But this movie was like I would have those questions, and then within a scene or two, one of those characters would be like, wait a minute. What are you doing here if this is going on? And I was like, oh, cool. We're actually going to see them. These very smart. Most of these bad guys are pretty smart, you know.
Yeah.
We're going to see them putting it together and recognize that none of them really wanted to be evil. You know, like none of them started off like evil take over the world types. They were mentally damaged, or what is it? You got to be careful what you fall into, or something they say at one point.
Where you fall. Yeah.
But anyway, lots of fun stuff going on. But also, I think what we're getting at is that emotional underpinning that makes this movie actually work to the point where it's not just that it's an academic idea. Oh, Peter Parker doesn't want to kill the bad guys. It's like we're watching it and we don't want him to kill him either. Like we agree that this movie would seem kind of brutal if it suddenly decided, oh, lives matter, but not these characters' lives. You know, like so. I don't know. I thought that was So yeah, we basically. If it sounds like we've spoiled the big reveals of this movie, we're really only talking about characters that were revealed in the trailer.
Absolutely.
I suppose this is where we might say what we're putting in the stocking for this movie, and then we can get into a spoiler special portion.
I mean, this is a gift card for me, no doubt.
For me,
I mean, this is one of the best movies. I mean, I think it's one of the best movies I've seen this year. And like you said, John, like I want to see it again, maybe a couple times, but like, yeah, this does feel like something that is going to make a run for like one of my favorite Marvel movies. The last thing I wanted to mention before we get in, and I don't mean to cut you guys off with the gift card thing. I just wanted to mention it before was like one of the things I felt that was so missing for me in the other Spider-Man movies, and like even where he shows up in the Avengers movies, was like I didn't really feel like much pathos like for the character, you know, much emotion for Peter Parker. And anytime I did feel it, it was all dependent on his emotional reaction to someone else.
Right.
And and that's there in this movie, and that's a lot of what does work in this movie. But I feel like for the first time as his run, as this character, there's so much more internal pain and internal emotion and internal just turmoil that like I don't really feel like he's really had to face in the other movies. And I think that it's so dialed up in this and so well balanced that that's really just kind of what sets it over the top for me. And I'm just like, man, wow, like what they tried to do with this and what they decided to do with this character in this movie as a part of their, trilogy of movies together was a bold move. And I think they nailed it. So yeah, for that, I will put a gift card in their stocking. I don't know what the gift card's to. Maybe to the donut shop that MJ works at. The Mary Jane works at.
Oh, pretty good. I was going to say like Lowe's hardware store. It seems like this at the end of this movie,
rebuild some stuff.
It seems like Peter Parker might need to like some late night trips to the hardware store to fix some stuff up. So
yeah.
But yeah, gift card for sure.
$500 Amazon gift card because you could just get whatever you want at that point.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
I mean, in New York, like it's you got like within an hour delivery there, right? Like you got that Amazon hour delivery there, so you can get it like instant.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
Would you say it's amazing, Ronald?
I would say it was amazing, better than the amazing.
Who else would you say is amazing? Is there anything else about this movie that we could talk about that might be amazing? Spoiler. Any spoilers?
Turn back now if you don't want to know the thing.
We love you guys for listening.
That everybody knew.
Merry Christmas.
Spoiler. There's a meme that I love of two Spider-Mans pointing at each other. Just really cool. But add another Spider-Man to that meme. You got three guys.
Let's try to do a point like with our windows here. I don't know where the.
Yeah, you're right, and you're to right of me, and you're below me. So I'm like,
I'll just do finger guns. Those weren't finger guns. What was that? It's getting late. Yes, the trigger. I was like wiggling it's like the bendy guns. But yes, we're talking about the hidden in plain sight, the rumor that we all knew was true.
Yeah.
Tom Holland himself said, "I'm so glad I can stop lying to people now when they ask me questions." This movie featured all the Spider-Mans from all the, at least the franchises, the film franchises, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all on screen playing their versions of Peter Parker opposite each other. I mean, those scenes were fucking magic. I would have watched a movie of just 3 Peter Parkers talking about techniques and comparing notes on what one of them has been through. I thought this movie, it just was some of the best earned banter that you've gotten in a recent Marvel movie. It was funny and touching. And the way they all 3 had their own way of looking at things. And like Andrew Garfield is fucking great as Peter Parker. And it was amazing to see him get to remind us that he was never the problem with those movies.
My God.
He was fantastic.
He was not. He's such a good Spider-Man. Go back and watch the first Amazing Spider-Man. Good Lord, is he good in that movie.
Even his voice. He
so
sounds
good.
like the guy you would get to do the voice acting on a Spider-Man cartoon. He's got like that sarcastic kind of a little bit annoying. I don't know. It's just... and then Toby's got an emo take that's just as endearing. But Andrew Garfield for me was sort of the big surprise.
Yeah.
I think that's across the board. He definitely seems to be the one that people are just tons of love going out to Andrew. And I think also partly because he probably did the best job of just denying this. Through and through in every press interview he's done over the last couple of years. But yeah, he was incredible. I think he definitely stands out as like the MVP in some ways of this movie because he does kind of have that weight kind of carried on him of like how poorly those, and it's weird because those movies really didn't do that poorly. They just kind of underperformed compared to what else was in the marketplace at that time. And you're talking about the MCU kind of kicking into second gear, and those movies dropping off from 1 to 2 is not good. Like that's a bad form.
Right.
But again, he was not ever the problem with those movies. The movies were, just the writing. I don't know. Just the movies are. I always found them to be fun and entertaining. But like when you think about what else is on the marketplace and what else is out there, they definitely seem to be lacking in a lot of ways.
Why didn't they bring back the diarrhea version of Green Goblin from or was it Hobgoblin? I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the goblins. Right.
Yeah. Dane DeHaan.
Dane DeHaan.
I don't know, but yeah, that's like the immediate thing though, is when you get that scene, and you first see Andrew and then Toby come through and they kind of have their moment together, and then finally when all 3 of them meet up, and you have Tom Holland's Peter Parker, like his friends kind of priming him for what's coming, and like we have some people that need to talk to you because it's at a very low point for him.
He's just lost Aunt May.
And it's and this is the emotional thing that they've decided to do with this trilogy, to kind of set it apart and differentiate it from the other filmed versions of Spider-Man. That basically, this trilogy is an origin story, or it is like a way to reset this character, not only for, the MCU / Sony Spider-Man universe, but just to reset the character that Tom Holland is giving us as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, which is the piece that I was alluding to earlier, just like a really fucking bold move that I think they completely land. And I think
you mean where he is at the end?
Yes.
Like, okay,
yes.
in a homemade suit, living on his own with no one's funding and nobody's friendship and nobody's knowledge of who he is.
And complete, and then anonymous.
And he's got a police scanner. Yeah. And he's using a police scanner to find petty crimes to go fight, and he goes swinging into the snowy night in his little homemade suit. Man, I fucking loved that so much. That felt so right, and it felt like it didn't even occur. It was amazing and spectacular.
It was amazing.
But it felt like, oh, it didn't even occur to me they took this many movies to get this version of Peter Parker to that spot that we know Spider-Man kind of lives in, which is the no help, no friends, nobody understands. Like, as much as I loved, and I was even saying to my son before seeing this movie, this version of Peter Parker has kind of been, oh, he's got Tony Stark's money and all these nanobot suits, and he's got friends, and he's got people that know who he is, like Aunt May, all these people in his life's so integrated, It's like he's the happy Spider-Man. And I said, well, that can't go on forever. They can't keep giving us a Spider-Man who ends the movie with his best friend and his girlfriend by his side. You know what I mean? You can't. That's not Peter Parker. Peter Parker's always losing and struggling, and that's why we love him so much. And I thought it was beautiful. Really, I thought it was. If we don't come back to his version of Spider-Man for a while, although I'm sure that Sony's already figuring out how to do this, but I'm just saying if we leave him for a movie or two, maybe Miles Morales comes in for a movie, maybe Gwen gets her moment. This was a great way to just leave Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man. You know, it's a great last image.
There's like something pretty heavy about being able to talk to Spider-Man at these different ages. There's this short on Disney Plus that you should check out called 20 something, about a woman's 21st birthday, where she's like trying to find her adulthood, and it shows her head in this jacket, and then beneath her are like 3 stages of her kind of in this jacket, crying because she's afraid of growing up, and her inner monologue is represented in these 3 stages of her life. And it really feels like this is sort of a thing, you know, if you could only tell yourself, you know, current you, that like, you know, midway through, it ain't that bad. Like you'll get over this one thing that you're feeling shitty about. If you could talk to your younger self, what would you tell yourself, you know? And he has, although these people don't look exactly like him, they've had a shared experience of having this weight of this responsibility on your shoulder, which we all do as adults, have unique sort of powers and responsibilities that we have to take on. And you know, I thought about how cool that was to just for a glimpse, you know, have an older version of yourself say it's okay. When you get to my age, you'll be fine.
Kind of like, it's going to be okay, kid. You know, like you're just a kid.
Yeah.
We see that scene where they all shared their miseries. For one thing, it was like the torch, because Tobey Maguire always had the best like ugly cry face, but the torch was passed to Tom Holland, who I had no idea that kid had such a good ugly cry face, but he got so fucking deep into that. I mean, like, that really was getting me. Just his like red eyes, and like that whole moment from when May died to like when they talked to him on the roof. It was all just intense for him. But him finding that they had their own tragedies was really affecting. And then also that you get a little redemption in this story for them. Like Toby's the elder statesman. He's seen a little bit more. His redemption was more in stopping Tom Holland's Peter from making this choice, from either letting the bad guy die or killing Norman Osborn. But it's like that redemption for Toby was like, I can now help someone else avoid the mistake I've made of having villains who've died. Very mature. And if he had died in that moment, it would have made me sad, but it would have felt like an earned death. I have to say, I liked him being like, "Don't worry, I've been stabbed before. I can take it." But in that brief moment, I felt like, "Oh wow, if they're gonna do that, that's the way to do this. Is have him die." This face to face, eye to eye with young Peter Parker that we know, so he can see like what heroism looks like. You know, it includes this moment, stopping you from doing a thing you might never forgive yourself for. And then the obvious redemption for Andrew Garfield's character of getting to save MJ. I mean, incredible moment. Like if I talk too much about it, I might get a little choked up. But it was intense. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Him, you know, because you want that for him. Again, it's Peter Parker, but it's also somehow it's Andrew Garfield. We want to see him get to have this big crowd pleasing moment. So.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk, the cinema, the theatrical, the crowd. Like he gets some of the biggest moments in the whole movie. Like multiple moments belong to Andrew Garfield in this movie, and including the joke of the meme. That moment is great, plays great. Him saving her plays great. Him even coming through the portal at the beginning saves. Everything he does in this movie is just phenomenal. He's so good in this movie as Peter and Spider-Man and all these things. But the MJ scene is just like, I mean, some people would say it's cheesy, heavy-handed, whatever, but I think that scene works so well. And him asking her if she's okay, is like it. Like you said, it'll make me emotional talking about it. Like it's so good. It's so good, and it's because it's just. I would say my only, and it not being perfect for me, there's a couple of things like just plot dynamics that kind of are questionable for me. But like you mentioned, the whole Toby being stabbed, that sequence. I thought that I did not like that sequence at all personally. I mean, the joke is fun after the fact, especially because like they've spent time like cracking each other's backs and like talking about feeling better and things like that.
That part
was
great.
So like the stabbing is a fun joke, but like I feel like the scene just kind of like plays so much better with him just kind of being in that moment with Tom and like seeing this is not the way to do it. And then I don't know. It's like the stab is so weird for me. That scene is probably one that bothers me the most because a moment later they save, he saves Norman, and like Toby saves Norman physically from this thing coming down on him. And then the other two Spider-Man like team up to get that antidote into him. But I just feel like that could have still happened without Toby being stabbed. It just felt like one of those.
No, it felt.
Like, oh my God, they're killing Tobey Maguire. I like lost my mind for a second, and I was like, what? That felt cheap for a second. Nothing else in the movie felt. I felt
right. Well, it's like I liked the joke well enough because they're obviously they're not going to kill him. But in the moment where it seemed like they're going to kill him, you're sort of like. They did something you might not have expected them to do. So I do think that whenever something like that, and it's not just a Marvel thing, a lot of franchises do it.
Yeah.
They tease something that feels like a bolder step than maybe they're willing to take, which is fine. Right. And it doesn't do that much to undermine the emotional import of that moment. But it does not. It is a little bit like you could have just cut the stab. You could have just left the stab out completely. And it would have been the same movie, essentially. And I think that, you're right, it feels a little cheap. It's like there's a Chewbacca death fake out in The Rise of Skywalker that's like that.
Or the C-3PO memory wipe.
Yeah,
like, it's just like, these things just kind of like feel like a fake out. And I feel like you say, take that stab out, and instead, as he's standing there, like, in direct, like, stare with Toby, like, just have Andrew walk up and, like, hand him that antidote and let him do it. Like, it's like, this is the mercy. This is the right thing. Like, you don't need to do that. Like, I just feel like that would have been a little bit more of a powerful, like team up scene to really get his version of Peter Parker to that point without like a fake out stab scene. Because like the crowd lost their damn mind when that happened. And I was like, oh my God, they just did that after he's talking about just making things work with Mary Jane. Like, no, let him get back to her, please.
I like, though, that when they asked him about it, he was like, yeah, it's complicated. Because it's like, even as a person who's watched those movies, you're like, what is the status of their relationship? I don't know.
Right. You're right, though, man. This movie is a miracle. It's kind of like, it is magical in so many ways, and so many scenes are just all-timers, man. Like, I keep telling like this guy I work with, we always talk about it. But like that sequence of them when they're like, I think that's when they're swinging up to to the Statue of Liberty, and it's like it's all three of them in their own unique way that they swing, and they're at the peak height of their swing, and like the moon is behind them, and it's their facade or their silhouettes.
Yeah,
that is like,
it's cool.
Wow,
man.
like I need that.
Well, then they land, and it's like three different stances too, like different styles of kind of posing.
It's so cool. It's so cool, man. So cool. Yeah. What a friggin' movie. What a blast. And again, I feel spoiled, man. Like, I feel like, especially going through movies being so weird, for the past couple of years, it's like, and even a couple episodes back, we were talking about like Dune and Bond, like, these big blockbusters coming out, it's like after quite a dry spell over the past 2 years. And it's like this movie comes about, and whatever's happening in the world right now with COVID still and this new variant, it's like this movie found a window to still come out.
Yeah.
It seems like at the tail end of what still might be a safe period.
Yeah.
And do its thing and let, kind of just, I don't know, make a mark and write its place into some sort of history books. And, it's like, I don't know, man. Like I felt very, very privileged to be able to see it. And I also saw it as exciting as I was seeing it with a crowd, like I was very comfortable seeing it. Like we bought out the seats around us too. Like, so we had buffers around us because Erin came with me. It was her first time back to the movies since the pandemic started. So we did everything we could to feel comfortable, and I definitely did. And I still got to benefit from that crowd interaction, but at a distance. But man, I can't wait to see it again. Hopefully, I don't know if I'll be able to see it again the way things are looking, but I'd like to, if possible.
By the way, what do you think of just tacking on a trailer as the post-credit scene? I thought that was kind of a cool.
That was cool as hell, man.
A cool feeling thing to do.
It's so smart.
It looks really cool. And as far as how that story seems to be piggybacking directly on this one, it just made you more excited for that. Though Doctor Strange will return. And you feel the Sam Raimi-ness. There's a little something different going on in the look and feel of this Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come out until May of 2022. I kind of like this. We've got a nice. I like this little 6-month buffer now that we've had so much Marvel. This is a good place to leave me.
Absolutely agree.
For 6 months. So
Yeah.
Oh man, Spider-Man: No Way Home in theaters for a long time, I guess, until it comes to Disney Plus. Actually, no, I don't think this one comes to Disney Plus.
Yeah, because it's
does it
all Sony.
So it's Sony, but Disney.
Yeah,
I have to look into that. I have to look into that. Well, I don't think so either, but they do have some sort of deal with Marvel.
Yeah,
but I don't know if it has, because Netflix has the deal with Sony.
Yeah,
so
first
it's
priority.
It's probably going to Netflix. Yeah. Crazy, dude.
Yeah, they released the Blu-ray art for it, and it looks, the steelbook for that shit looks amazing.
For Spider-Man?
For Spider-Man, they already
I didn't see it.
Like,
I didn't see it.
They released the steelbook art and stuff like that for it. So I'm looking forward to it being at home, like so we can watch it on our TVs and pause it and oh God, I never noticed that. And I can't wait for that.
Well, I loved seeing the shot that was what everyone suspected. Remember the shot in the trailer where the villains are jumping out and you see the lizard's head go back?
Yes.
And everyone was like, it looks like they digitally removed another Spider-Man from this shot, and that shot was right there in the movie. I thought that was kind of gratifying.
Took them right out. Took them right out of that scene. Strange.
Yeah, the lizard's in this too. We didn't really mention him. He's fun. Yeah. He's well done. It's just there's not much for that character to do in the soup of all these other characters. He's kind of destined to be the other guy standing around when you've got these dynamic characters.
And another reason why poor Andrew's Spider-Man movies didn't really work is that, like, whatever their goal was to build to, I guess, there was rumors of like the Sinister Six of it all, but the villains in his movies were very not good.
I liked him saying, like, I fought a Russian gangster in a rhinoceros costume.
Yeah, him joking about the quality of his villains. Yeah, that's a nice little hit at Sony for sure.
God,
I want to fight an alien.
You think he gets another Spider-Man movie? You think he'd do it?
I think the door is open. I think the door is open for either one of those guys to do something now. I don't know. I don't think we've seen the last of both of them. It's possible.
I think Toby's done.
It's possible Toby's done, but somehow I feel like Andrew Garfield would be in the conversation. Like, his character didn't seem. It almost felt like they were queuing him back up. You know what I mean? To do something. Yeah. But I don't know why they would need him, frankly, with all the stuff they have going on. So.
Well, I mean, you see how the movie ends, and you basically realize that this is not in Venom's world. You know what I mean? So, like, maybe he's from Venom's world. Maybe that's a way to get him involved in that.
No, that's a good point.
I would.
But yeah, he's just like so primed. Like, he's got this groundswell of love and.
That he deserves.
Yeah, and I just feel like, and it was so apparent that he was having a blast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like just so into it and so enthusiastic, which he always had been. But yeah, I don't know, man. I loved it. Can't wait to see it again.
Everyone should watch the supercut of him denying being in the movie. Someone's made a shot. God. Like, they put together every time he was asked.
What?
Yeah, for everything that he's legitimately should be in consideration for Oscars this year, whether it's as a Tammy Faye or Tick Tick Boom, the real contender, the real they should be watching is that supercut.
Yeah,
of him denying. Well, I mean, Spider-Man: No Way Home.
How good an actor is he? Well, let's find out.
He's not good.
Just play the compilation.
Yeah.
God, that was He did it in a way that felt so like, how dare you ask me this? Like, it felt like that a lot.
But he was always so nice about it, though.
Yeah,
He was always like, I had a really good time being Spider-Man. Some things didn't work out, but it was a really great opportunity. Like, I'm not in it, but like, I can't wait to see it. Like, I hope it's awesome. Like, he was so positive about it still.
But what's funny is to think now we know he was saying that knowing that he just might steal the movie. Like,
that's
right. I just might.
He's like, I
got the best Peter Parker.
The ace is up my sleeve, and I'm gonna act like I have nothing to do with this fucking movie.
So cool, man.
Yeah, go see it if you haven't, if you're comfortable doing so. If not, wait. Eventually, it'll come on. I guess we've decided Netflix will probably get it, but
Yeah.
um,
According to us, it's got Netflix.
breaking news.
Yeah.
It's going to Netflix. Cool, man. All right, well, let's wrap this up.
Let's swing out of here.
We got to get on to Christmas.
Yeah.
So we'll get together, I guess, right before the new year, hopefully, and catch up on some other stuff. Schmovie.com is the website. You can go there and really jump into any of our portals, and social media, YouTube. We're everywhere. If you can find a podcast, if you subscribe to it, please leave a review if it's available, or a star rating, whatever you can do to leave some sort of feedback. We'd really appreciate it. So I guess we'll see you just before the other side, just before the new year comes, and then we'll see you after again, and then again and again, all the way to 350 episodes.
Yeah.
And that's where we check out, guys.
Yeah. If you're new to the show, you don't know this little bit of lore, but we decided back at episode 175 that we were halfway there.
Right.
And so 350 is coming up. So
so strap in. It's going to be a bumpy ride, guys.
Yeah.
All right, man. We'll see you guys soon. Good seeing you both. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.